So hello and welcome to the New Gig podcast. I'm your host, Glen Hodgson. And today I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of UnderPinned, Mr. Albert Azis-Clauson. How are you doing, Albert?
Really good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Glenn.
Absolute pleasure. Now, there's so much going on at the moment, Albert, where to start? I think it would be good just to give a little bit of background about yourself, how you got into the whole freelance movement and what UnderPinned are up to today.
Okay, cool. So let's go back a bit. I grew up as a ballet dancer. I went to the Royal Ballet School. So I was very much in the creative world. And then I left that and started doing a million different other things, which eventually led me to doing computer science and really enjoying that. I actually studied philosophy of science at university, but I kind of fell in love with logic, linguistics, computer science, building things. Yeah. And so I had this weird relationship between creativity and communication and philosophy, and then actually building stuff. And that led me to start doing a number of things in the world of business, which included business strategy, consultancy, where I really focused on how companies could overcome the hurdle of going from a good product and business to a high growth company, which usually entailed hiring teams of highly specialized freelancers to build the systems that would get them over that hurdle, of which I was one. On the other side, I ran a media and arts company that helped young and emerging artists build their businesses. So that was all about helping creatives commercialize their skill set and build successful businesses around their craft. I founded a charity and helped fund a few other charities around disadvantaged and at-risk children, which was about helping them overcome life issues using creative workshopping. But in all of these things, the same narrative was being constantly presented to me, which was the way that people are working and changing, the way that people are working is changing, and people's attitudes towards what aspects of work are important to them are changing. And so effectively, I was surrounded by, at the time, hundreds, if not thousands of people who were trying to work in a more flexible, hybridized, but perhaps most importantly, value-driven format. And I say value-driven as opposed to time-driven. You know, these people were delivering value-based projects rather than kind of like sitting at a desk for a certain number of hours a week. And that was really interesting. That formed the foundation of what UnderPinned is, particularly the work I was doing with creatives. So it started off with designers. And then it was graphic designers and illustrators and journalists and copywriters and then web developers. And eventually I was sitting down with kind of back-end engineers, financial advisors and accountants, teaching them how to build a business. And what I realized was there was a huge amount of focus on this freelance format of work from platforms and financial service providers, but no one was really looking at the individuals. No one was really going, what are they lacking in working in this new format? And ultimately, UnderPinned was founded along four key problems that we identified. First was a lack of education. Nobody has ever left university, or very, very few people have left university or full-time employment feeling confident, comfortable, and understanding of how to build a successful freelance business or independent business, no matter how good they are at their skill. Number two, all the software systems that help people build businesses are aimed at departments of SMEs. So all the kind of the big names in the SaaS world are aimed at departments within SMEs because that's been the big opportunity for the last 30 years. Next is that the most valuable activity a freelancer can do is generating a network. So the uniquely identifying factor of a successful freelancer is their network or ability to build one. And yet all of the focus in the industry is on transactional recruitment, which is the least effective way to build a network. And then finally is the lack of community, or rather isolation and loneliness, which leads to problems in confidence as well as access to network development. And so those four areas were the things that we wanted to focus on. And although there is obviously a huge amount of value to be developed in helping clients work with freelancers, the bigger economic, social, cultural deficit is on the facilitations of the independent workers rather than of the client's ability to work with them. And so that's why UnderPinned was developed. And that's what we solved. We solved the problem with content, community, education, and software.
Absolutely fantastic. And thanks for that great overview of what you've been up to, but also what you're doing now. And I think you really hit upon a key element here, Albert, and that's really how to turn your passion into a business. The two aren't necessarily the same thing, and it takes a little bit of work, effort, and no little creativity as well to get from sort of that idea and what you're good at to turning it into a business.
Yeah, I think I have a bit of an issue sometimes with the use of the word passion and the passion economy, because I think to a certain extent it can undermine the importance, the kind of commercial and business importance of it. And what I don't want it to be presented as is a bunch of young people doing what they love and not really worrying about the kind of commercial side. I think the really interesting thing about turning your passion into a business is actually about the reduction of the disassociation between business and life. In that the kind of common factor that I find of successful freelancers, beyond the fact that they have a successful network, is that they are interested in their work and they do projects that they're interested in with clients that they're interested in. So they're the kind of the reason a lot of people are leaving full-time employment is to find that level of flexibility, work-life balance, access to jobs that they enjoy. And I think building a business around your passion is as much about making yourself passionate about your business as it is around building it around a craft that you love. And so what I'm trying to say in the most simple terms humanly possible is that building a business is quite a difficult activity. Being passionate about something is not. So how do we bridge the gap between the two to make the things that you're passionate about accessible from the perspective of a business? I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I think that UnderPinned also has a great strategy here as well, with actually not just talking about it, but doing it through the accelerator programs and the real learning experiences that you offer to individuals who want to create something, who want to go further and develop a business in a meaningful way.
I think so. This is one of the really complex things about building a company like UnderPinned. I think it's worth mentioning at this juncture that UnderPinned is still kind of a research project, a big and valuable research project commercially and unto itself, but a research project nonetheless. And as we've discussed before, the future of work is as yet undefined. However, the characteristics of the future of work are very much starting to present themselves at quite a large scale. And I think the best way of looking at freelancers, rather than as a tax structure, as a legal entity, as a format of work, is as an early adopter of the systems of the future of work. And if we start to look at freelancers like this, we start to uncover some really exciting evidence that will allow us to build systems that will help the future. And one of the kind of problems that software companies often face is that it's almost impossible to build a product for a future that doesn't exist yet. You have to build a product for people that currently exist, right? Yeah. So our focus is on, well, right now, the problems we can solve and be commercially valuable in solving are for individuals building their businesses. Now, as I said, there were 4 key problems to that. So how do we actually do it? Well, number 1, we use content. We use a magazine, an online magazine. We work with other people. We use partnerships. We bring people into the sphere of UnderPinned so that they understand that there is this group of people that are working in a similar format. And we help people feel like they're part of something. Next, we have community. We let people engage with us. We let people engage with each other. We let people find mentors, mentees, collaborators, peers. Next, we have education. And this is the accelerator program. We built an accelerator program based on the core concepts of how to build a successful business that I developed. And that whole process functions in 2 ways. 1, it is a very, very successful onboarding system to our software platform. But 2, and more interestingly, it helps people bridge the gap of knowledge of, I have something I'm good at. I have something I'm good at I can make money from. And that is a surprisingly big gap to bridge. And I'll give you one piece we have from it, which I think it kind of outlines the whole process, which is that most people think of themselves as a profession, as a set of skills. You are not. You are a business. You have functions of a business that go far beyond your skills. Number 2, most people think about themselves as selling a service or selling their skills. You do not. You sell a solution to a problem. Now, what that then means, number 3, is that your skill set become a toolkit to solve problems. They become a means to an end for a customer or client rather than an end unto itself. And finally, you wear 2 hats. You have your skills, your craft, your service provision, and then you have your business building. And only one of those 2 hats will make you money, and it's your business building. I've never met somebody who does not have a skill set they could monetize. I've also never met somebody who's not done it before, who has a real understanding about how to do that process. Now, the whole purpose of this accelerator program, and it's a bit more complex than those 4 points, is to go, you're a business that sells a solution using your skill set as a toolkit to solve problems for clients and customers. And the things that will help you build your business are business building activities and not honing your craft. And that's kind of fundamentally is what the accelerator program is. And then the software system is very simple. It's a series of tools in one place to facilitate all of the business building activities you need to do, from finding clients and proposing, giving them proposals and portfolios, through to invoicing, contracts, and project management.
Excellent. And we see also within this, increasingly now, Albert, digitalization taking over society as well as the world of work as well. And, you know, the companies, organizations and individuals who can harness this power are the ones who are doing well, who are navigating it properly and making money out of it as well. I mean, how do you see the kind of the trend of digitalization going forward?
So, I mean, the one thing that COVID has done is taken massive enterprise companies through to very small independent shops and gone, you have to engage with digital communication. You have to engage with digital banking. You have to engage with digital project management because otherwise your business won't survive. And what that's meant is a massive widespread adoption of technology that already existed, but at a scale we couldn't have expected to happen so quickly. And there are a few really interesting trends that were born out of this. There's this kind of business demand pull trend that has been born out of this, which is that, okay, now we use all of these systems. The differentiation between a full-time staffer and a freelancer or an independent business or a small business has become much smaller because the ways that we interact are now much more similar and much more sophisticated. So that's one thing. So the businesses are now more willing to and more able to work with people who are a bit more transient or project-based. Second, they've also realized that a lot of their staff were not functionally necessary because a lot of companies had to furlough or lay off lots of people because they were struggling. And what has been born out of that is a much greater use of freelancers for specific value-based tasks. So there's a huge demand pull driven by the facilitation of technology and the business understanding of actually having to do it. And then there's this huge supply push because everybody is sitting at home going, I'm communicating digitally. I way prefer having a nap at lunchtime to not having a nap at lunchtime. I way prefer being able to walk my dog and talk to my kids. I way prefer being able to go out with my friends after lunch because actually I don't have much to do and I can finish it off in the evening because people took control of their time. And so suddenly everyone's going, well, actually, the 9-to-5 thing doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me. I work way better and I'm more happy when I work like this. I was in lockdown and kind of miserable, and yet still I was a better worker. How can I try and facilitate those kinds of interactions with my skills more normally? And so people have started to go, well, I did this thing I was really interested in, this passion project, this hobby I did it while I was off, while I was on furlough or while I was working from home, and I want to continue that. And so you have this huge group of people who are going, I get it. I want to work like that. And then you have companies going, we want it and we can facilitate it. What we don't have is a very clear relationship or development of the breaking down of the wall, actually is a better way of describing it, of what an employee or freelancer looks like. Currently, they're two totally different things. And the future of work is not freelancing. The future of work is not full-time employment. The future of work is a blended workforce. And what we're navigating now is how do we facilitate that, both technologically, legally, from a policy perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, from an educational perspective. And that's a piece of work that I'm fundamentally interested in.
Absolutely. It is key because there's so much happening and the future's already here. Let's be realistic about it. And I mean, would you say there's a difference here in sort of the age groups here, millennials and also Gen Z? Are they much more tuned into this, much more aware of what's happening, would you say, Albert?
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting question because if you look at the statistics of people who have some sort of freelance work, it drastically increases from 29% to 80% if you go from Gen X through to Gen Z or boomers through to Gen Z or whatever it is. But that is a fact. Younger people are working like this in a more plethora manner. However, a lot of the money is still generated by people who are more successful, who are at a higher age bracket, which is really interesting. And I think the explanation, well, the evidence that I have suggests this is the explanation. To be successful as an independent worker, you have to have a pretty good grasp of commercial transactions. You have to have a pretty good grasp of how to interact with businesses and customers. Where do you get that kind of experience? By working in a business. Yeah. And particularly in the UK, but globally, we are geared towards very academic education up until higher education. And then you go and learn about the world of commercial. Now, what we have now is this quite awkward phenomena of young people not being given full-time jobs and not wanting full-time jobs, and therefore not getting that roadmap to learn how to be commercial while trying to build their successful businesses. So we have this disassociation of these older generations who are going, the ones who are going into freelancing, contracting, are much more successful because they have that understanding and that experience. but there's not many of them doing it. And down here we have all of these other people trying to do it and not being given the tools, infrastructure, or knowledge to do it. So yeah, I mean, most young people, and that's not an exaggeration, a majority of young people under the age of 30 want to work as an independent worker. That's a fact.
Right. Yeah.
And also a majority are trying to find a way to. That's a fact. And yet facilitation of it is really difficult. The really exciting opportunity then is, if we can help build the bridge to do that, the economic opportunity that's there to uncover is vast. It is vast and incredibly exciting.
And it's just waiting for the world to catch up to what's already happening, what we see every day, Albert, and people from across different sectors, different skill sets, but really trying to engage and harness what's going on to be able to give themselves a better situation and more of a people talk about work-life balance, but doing what you enjoy, but also having more flexibility and control over your time. This seems to be the key crucial element of this.
Yeah, I think that there's two things to say there. One is that you enjoy what you do more if you do it in an enjoyable way. So you don't have to be doing something that you passionately love as a vocation, but if you're doing it in a way that works for you, it becomes more enjoyable. And that's important. And I think the other thing that you just picked up on really accurately is I often forget how lucky I am to see so much of this. You know, when I have conversations with people who are not you, Glenn, it's like, oh my God, you have no idea what's happening. And this is probably the biggest hurdle that the two of us, among others, have to overcome, which is, how do we uncover this really interesting piece? And one of the things that, you know, we've been doing together through the Association of the Future of Work recently is going, actually, one of the problems that we're facing is there's a lot of pieces of this puzzle, and currently they're all siloed. There are a lot of people working on future of work problems and not calling them future of work. There are a lot of people working on future of work problems and not talking to each other. And one of my real ambitions, and one of the things that I hope I've already started to facilitate, is we need to have a conversation with all parts of this the project program of this future, because right now, government, policymakers, educators, facilitators, builders, as in tech builders or other types of product-based builders, are not seeing the future of work as a whole picture. And if you only see a sliver, you see an interesting market opportunity. If you see the whole thing, you see a cultural and societal, globally cultural and societal changing trend that will fundamentally change the way that we both work and live over the next 10 to 20 years.
Absolutely. And what's your feeling about this, you know, from the sort of decision makers and policymakers around this? Do you think they're open to this? Do you think they're available for discussions to understand what's happening and how fundamental a change is going on at the moment, Albert?
So I think there's a very kind of sad truth to any sort of stakeholder engagement, which is that any stakeholder is interested in the things that move the dial for something that is relevant to them. And for most policymakers, the future of work is a terrifying trend in tax collection. And what I mean by that is, historically speaking, the future of work has been really focused on two main areas, which is gig work, gig platforms, and contractors, very long-term contract workers, both of which throw up real complexities for employee benefits, for national insurance payments in the UK and whatever equivalents are globally, for other sorts of tax contributions by businesses. In other words, it throws up a lot of complexities due to the legal status of the worker. Now, what's really interesting with the rise of freelancing, i.e. value project-based work, is that it's not really relevant to the tax structure. The thing that is interesting is the format of work and the format of delivery of value. But from policymakers' perspectives, what does currently matter is this is a very complex problem from a tax perspective. So to answer your question, they are interested currently in understanding how they can avoid the massive loss of tax from the black hole that is people forgetting to, not knowing how to, or just not doing their returns. But there is a beginning to be an appetite, and we are seeing a few people start to pop up in this. And for this to change, there are two things that need to be done initially. One is an educational piece. How do we present the future of work in a way that makes sense in terms of stakeholders' appetites. And for policymakers, that's about generation of economic opportunity, which includes the generation of tax revenues. And that's about unlocking this potential. And then number two is standardization and facilitation of those changes. And from policymakers' perspectives, we have all of our contractual law and employee law geared towards historical formats of work. Until policymakers start to create standardization models for contractual law, for payment terms that are focused on individual workers, this won't change. So to answer your question very simply, I believe that the appetite is beginning, but to be honest, there's no understanding of what is the opportunity in this space. And until that hurdle is really overcome for policymakers, the second stage of the facilitation is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, and it's already happening, and we're seeing these every day, sort of the movement that's moving forward. And just tell everyone about what the next steps are now, particularly with the Association of the Future of Work, because we're on the start of a bit of a journey, Albert.
We are, and you're here with me. So the Association for the Future of Work started as an idea to bring together some interesting people to talk about how we can build better systems for the future of work. Now, the foundation of this idea was when I realized that UnderPinned was a research project, when I realized that freelancers were early adopters and not the end goal, and when I realized that we need to build the infrastructure from the perspective of policymakers, educators, platforms, and businesses to facilitate, and individuals to facilitate a successful, fair, and economically exciting future of work. And what that came to was this initial idea to host a summit, a roundtable of sorts, to start to identify how we can approach this. Now, that this really needed to fulfill this one initial goal of, this is a really segmented area. In order to create the narrative that is exciting enough and big enough and important enough and practical enough, we need to bring together quite a lot of quite important people.
Yes.
So that was challenge number one. And I think we facilitated that very well. Number two was, when you have these kinds of conversations, it's very difficult for them to be effective at producing change. The reason being, whenever you get clever people in a room together, they have a lot to say. And so organizing and distilling a lot of words into a practical plan is very difficult.
Yeah.
And that was the reason we founded the Association for the Future of Work. The Association for the Future of Work is a body that will become an organization of organizations globally to facilitate an evidence-based, practical approach to building a successful future of work, considering the key stakeholders that need to be involved in that. And that first summit that you attended, what really we facilitated then, what we achieved then was A, we brought everybody together for the first time ever. B, we started the conversation of what the future of work is and made it a conversation with a linear narrative. And C, we identified the key categories and the key problems within those categories faced by the future of work. And at every stage, as I said at the summit, the really important thing here is that everything is evidence-based and progressive.
Yes.
When you build a business, you need to identify what the problem is, who has the problem, how you can solve the problem, and why you're the right person to solve the problem. And then more broadly, what it is you do. We are working on the future of work. We've understood and identified what the problems are. Now we need to identify in a more discrete manner the stakeholders, and then how we can solve the problems for those stakeholders to benefit. So at each stage of this project, which we hope to facilitate a final report, an initial final report by the end of this year, 2022, we are going to be doing research that validates the propositions that we come up with at each of these summits, of which I imagine there'll be 3 to 5 before we finish the project.
Yes. Excellent. Wow. There's so much going on, pointing in the right direction and really making sense of what's happening. I think this is absolutely crucial at the moment, and how it helps, at the end of the day, individuals, companies and organizations, but also society. That's the end goal here. And I think that the future's already here, and we're on the right track, Albert. It's been fantastic to be able to speak to you, for you to share your passion, enthusiasm, and knowledge. And this is the first of several, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that this is such an exciting thing to be able to talk to people with, especially with someone like you who's doing so much in this space and has such a genuine, deep and excited understanding of it. I get way too excited about this, and I hope to continue to.
That is a good sign. Excellent. Thanks for your time, and we'll speak
Thank you very
soon.
much.